Good evening. I feel so important standing up on this podium. It's wonderful. My name's Joel Schiller. I'm with Artisans Bank, and I'm chair of the DFLI board. And on behalf of the entire board of DFLI and the staff, I'd like to welcome you to brand new Invent, Reinvent, Invest. In its 16th year, DFLI continues to help adults, youth, and small businesses plan, save, and prosper by offering free financial programs and classes throughout the state. We have a very exciting program for you tonight, so I'm going to keep my introductory comments very brief. I will say I know everybody is probably hungry, but at 7 o'clock when the program is finished, we'll go over to the exhibit hall. We'll interact with the exhibitors. There'll be an open bar. There'll be a buffet. And so there's a few snacks in the back just to tide you over. But I think everybody can make it to 7 o'clock. A couple of introductory comments. First, I'd like to thank our sponsors tonight, without, of course, whom our program would not happen. Our lead sponsor tonight is Barclays Bank. And Raman Merritt from Barclays will be up in just a second to say a few words. And while he comes forward, I'd like to thank our other sponsors, TD Bank USA, Office of the Treasurer for the City of Wilmington, Velda Jones-Potter, Danette Rivera Development Group, and the Kenny Family Foundation of ShopRite. Raman, would you like to say anything on behalf of Barclays? And let's give Barclays a hand for their support tonight.
Good evening. As Joe said, my name is Raman Merritt. I am with Barclays Bank. I am within our U.S. Branded Consumer Group. And I've had the distinct pleasure of working with Ronnie and team for about the last 6 months. But the relationship that Barclays has with the DFLI has gone for years and a lot longer than I've had the opportunity to work with yet. But it's one of those things where the bank has been here for almost 13 years now. And while we have continued to grow and establish our footprint throughout the U.S., it's really been the contributions and working with not just the colleagues within our organization, but working really more importantly with programs like the DFLI, who are doing great work within our community. All of us are from the work within the greater Wilmington area. Our kids go to the same schools. We shop at the same restaurants. We leverage the same services. So when we have programs like this, it's a tremendous opportunity for me to be able to participate in any way I can with the Money School and with the other programs like the Launcher program, which Barclays has worked with, to provide additional support, because it is one of the greatest things that we have been able to do within the community. So with that, I do want to thank you all for coming out. I know it's always a challenge to come out to these types of evening events, but the Money School has put together a great one for you today. So welcome everyone, and enjoy the rest of the evening.
Thank you, Raman. I'd also like to thank our exhibiting partners for tonight's program, the Delaware Libraries, the Delaware Community Reinvestment Action Council, the Launcher Entrepreneurship Program, DFLI Center for Business Growth, TD Bank, and the Rivera Development Group. I'd also like to call your attention to the many other exhibitors that are listed in tonight's program and who are displaying at the end of the exhibition hall. I hope you'll take time after the presentations tonight to plan to spend some time with them. I think that would be great. I'd like to take a moment just to recognize the DFLI board and the staff. I want to thank them for all their assistance in putting on tonight's program. We've got 3 very enthusiastic speakers who will share how they invented and reinvented themselves. I'm sure we'll all learn a lot from their experiences. When you first came in, there were sign-in cards, At 8 o'clock tonight at the DFLI table in the exhibit hall, there's going to be a drawing for door prizes. So if you haven't filled out a sign-in card, you'll have an opportunity at the end of the presentations to fill one out before the drawing. And there's also going to be a second drawing at 8 o'clock for the responses to the Why I Give. All the board members have written back to DFLI and explained why it's so important to give back to DFLI. If you take the moment to fill out a Why I Give card, you'll have an opportunity to also receive a door prize. After the program, please continue to enjoy the networking and visit the many resources we have here tonight. We hope you enjoy the sips and the snacks, and please feel free to chat with our speakers after the program. So I think it's time to get the program started and introduce our speakers. Their bios are listed in the program, so I won't repeat them. I'll just ask Ronnie. Senator Coons is not here yet. And so I will take this opportunity to introduce our first speaker, the Honorable Ken Simpler, Delaware State Treasurer. Ken, come on up. Thank you for being here with us tonight.
Good evening, everybody. Actually started the morning here with Senator Coons addressing the Fund for Women in the room right next door. I don't know if anyone was here for that program, but he was very good this morning. He was on his game, so I hope he does show up. He was quite clever. I think his funniest line, well, I'm going to steal it from him, but he's working in Washington these days, and he basically said that when he fills out his W-2 now, that he fills it out as anger management is his profession. And he referred to having had several teachable moments in the last couple months. But I want to thank you for having me tonight. I want to thank Ronnie and Joel for giving me the opportunity to speak to you. As state treasurer, I usually talk, as you can imagine. I've only been in this job for about 2.5 years, and well, you hired me into it, and what I do most days is operate our FISC, our state fiscal operations. So if you want a sample of what it's usually I'm talking about or thinking about, my communications director in the back, Kristen Coopers, has a nice fancy handout that was run in the News Journal today online. It's about what I conceive to be a grand bargain that we can do bipartisan revenue reform and spending control at the same time. We can do it all together, and we can do it next legislative session. So if you want to pick up a copy of that on your way out, or with my newsletter is with it, you'll get an idea of what I normally address audiences about and talk about. But I told Ronnie I was very diligent in reading my materials as the speaker sheet she gave to me that I was supposed to address 3 topics tonight. One was professional development. One was maneuvering your career through, I think, success and failure. Another was rebooting your personal or professional life. And she gave me 7 minutes to address all those. I thought that was very generous. So in strict compliance, I brought 3 books that I'm going to read. Actually, I don't know if any of you have friends that I have friends now that like to give me books and reads. I don't know what it is about being in public office. People think you should read more. So when I got this request to speak tonight, I actually tried to think of what can I say along these 3 topics, or what wisdom has been distilled to me. Not just me, what I've observed in my personal life, but in 2 of them, it came very quickly to me because they're books I've just read probably in the last 3 months, but one I had to go back a little bit further on. But in the world of professional development, I think that there's, if there's one thing that I rang true about this first book, and it's called Little Bets. And I'm not a shill for the publishing house. I do not have any royalties coming from any of these. But if you're interested in titles and self-improvement and ways to sort of learn after you leave this room, I'd recommend this book, Little Bets by Peter Sims. The reason being is because I think most people, when they think about getting their career going meaningfully in a different direction, think they have to make some big change, some really big bet, the ranch and the farm and the dog. But this book by Peter actually looks at really successful entrepreneurs. The one that comes to mind most recently, because he's been in the news a lot, is Jeff Bezos, who started Amazon. And what the author actually observes is that highly successful people don't necessarily make these tremendous big bets where they risk everything. They actually make lots and lots of small bets. And what that means is that they're willing to fail a lot. So they take lots of bets that are little, to try to get ahead, knowing that a lot are going to fail, and as a consequence, they don't bet the ranch because you can only bet the ranch once. You only got, well, unless you have multiple ranches. But so they make lots of bets on the assumption that the bets are affordable to lose. And I've seen that in my own personal life when my career, you're going to hear from Matt Meyer, who spent a long time in public service in different capacities. Most of my experience is in the private sector in finance. I was an investment manager for a global firm. And what I observed in our core businesses, we were able to take a core business that worked in the US and expand it to Europe, expand it to Asia very successfully. And that was really the core part of our business that I never put at risk. But around that core business, I made lots of small bets. And quite frankly, a lot of them bombed. But several spun off into small businesses that became medium-sized businesses in their own regard. But in no case did I make a venture that I didn't think the business could sustain to lose. I see the same parallel that we need to do in state government now as your state treasurer. We just aren't an organization that likes to take risks of any kind. But we have to start to, if we're going to go forward as a people, take little manageable risks. And so I see this in my professional career as a finance officer. I see it today in state government. And so again, it's little bets, Peter Sims. That's professional development. In a nutshell. Anybody have any questions? No. The second one, I didn't really know exactly what Ronnie meant by maneuvering your career through failure, but if you're going to make lots of little bets, let's say you take the advice of Mr. Sims and you take lots of little bets. I mean, ideally you'd like as many of those to work out as not, so maybe more. The next author, I don't know if you've ever heard of Michael Lewis, but he's written a lot of really easily read topical books, bestsellers. He's a great author to just read. But in this book called The Undoing Project, fairly recently, he talks about the fact that, and undoing refers actually, I am not going to talk about microeconomic theories, and I promise you I'm not going to talk about microeconomic theory, but the whole field of microeconomic theory is based on the assumption that all of us make rational decisions. So the whole science is based on the fact that individual human beings make rational choices. Undoing is sort of undoing that thesis, that in fact, two Israeli psychiatrists got the Nobel Prize for basically studying us as humans and saying, we don't behave at all rationally. In fact, we make really predictable systematic errors in judgment. And so if you read this book, it's a quick read, but it'll actually highlight for you the types of judgment problems that we're faced with routinely in business or in our professions, where we're most prone to make obvious and predictable errors. And I say that as someone who is in finance that worked with a bunch of quantitative people with PhDs from places like MIT. They make the same errors. So what I see also in this book is, again, related to my personal life, I left the field of finance, my job for the firm I worked at, around 2005, because if you remember that period, we were all investing in real estate like it was never gonna go down. And I had watched the tech bubble blow up, inflate and deflate, and I had seen all the money basically leave technology and go into real estate, and I kept saying this is not right. And all of our models inside our firm, one of the largest, most successful investment firms on the planet, said no, there's no problem, there's no mortgage crisis, there's no nothing. So what I learned is that we can operate in environments where systemically around us the systems are broken, and so we can't make good decisions inside an organization when systemically the framing is done by, frankly, misaligned systems. I see the same thing in state government. So, you know, as your state treasurer, the piece I wrote today was about our budgeting systems and how it's tough to make really good decisions if the framework you're working within actually leads you to make irrational choices. And that's the system we have today. And that's why you see a lot of dysfunction in terms of how we get to the finish line every year in trying to balance our budget. And it's very distracting, and frankly, we don't make rational choices. So again, Michael Lewis, The Undoing Project, that's my nutshell around maneuvering, you know, and making your choices in your career and trying to enhance the success of those, but also try to mitigate some of the failures. And I guess the final thing that, you know, the topic I was asked to address was rebooting your life or rebooting your career. This book is a great read for anybody for any reason. If you haven't heard about Option B, it really is, every one of us is going to deal with tragedy or loss or something very painful in our lives that we have to overcome. There was a woman a couple years ago who worked as the #2 person in an enormous technology company. Have you ever heard of Facebook? Okay. Sheryl Sandberg is the chief operating officer for Facebook, works directly under the founder, Mark Zuckerberg. And she was obviously in a technology world where not a lot of women make it to the quote-unquote C-suite. She was very famous for a book she wrote a couple years ago called Lean In, where she told women that were in leadership positions to sort of lean into your job and really own that and show other women the way. She got criticized for this for different reasons, but ironically, a year after she wrote that book, she was married to an incredibly successful technology husband who, have you ever heard of SurveyMonkey? If you ever been, but he was the founder of that and the CEO of that, but they were a big time tech company out in Silicon Valley and very well known internationally, and they went on this vacation with friends, and he went to the gym and he got on the treadmill, had a heart attack, fell off, hit his head, and he died. And so they had 2 young children. They were on top of the world. She was the number 2 person in a massive company, and obviously this was a terrible thing to try to overcome for anybody. And she found, I think, sort of catharsis in writing this book called Option B, because Option A sometimes doesn't plan out the way you planned it. So she writes this book as sort of a treatise on how do we as human beings develop resiliency. How do we develop the capacity to handle these traumas that all of us, whether it's a loved one or whether it's a career change or something else, that we're all going to go through at some point in time. And so the book is a great read for anyone who just wants to know not just how you deal with tragedy when it occurs, but how you prepare yourself better for what ultimately is always going to come some challenge in your life. But I took it because there's a particular chapter around the workplace that I didn't expect to read. I read it, frankly, because I had a very good friend, family who's lost a daughter and a sister this summer unexpectedly and very tragically, and I was thinking about them and how you cope. But I found that it actually enlightened me as in the workplace, because of Chapter 9, and I distributed this to all my employees in the office, is about resiliency in the workplace and how you become not just more resilient as an employee or as a manager, but how you become more resilient as a team. To function and get through failure. And I found, again, in my own professional workplace, it made me a more empathetic manager. It made me more effective at giving people constructive feedback. But it also, for our whole team in state government, if you work in state government, we don't like to talk about failure. We don't address, we do very little in the way of helping people get better by giving them constructive advice in terms of personnel plans and reviews and constructive feedback. And as an organization, we like to sort of put our failures behind us and not examine them terribly closely, certainly not in the public limelight, right? But the book actually points out the fact that we grow through those, right? The only way we get better is by actually rigorously examining when we've gone wrong. And it gives some pointers as to how we personally can accept critical feedback. And ironically, when you accept and invite critical feedback, which none of us like, you get more of it, which might sound bad, but that's the way we get better. So again, I think if you're trying to reboot and trying to figure out how you deal with adversity and gain resilience in the workplace, Sheryl Sandberg, Option B, and even if you just want to figure out how to become a better human being, it's a great read. So that is, I think, more than my 7 minutes of allotted time tonight to talk about professional development, maneuvering through your professional careers, failures and successes, and rebooting. And I would just say there's a lot of wisdom to be gained in anything you can read, and I welcome the fact that a lot of you I know have taken advantage of the resources here at the Money School, and I encourage you to keep trying to learn from others in terms of how they have succeeded or failed and moved on. So thanks for your time tonight, and I'm happy to be around for a little while afterwards if you guys have any questions. Appreciate it.
Well, I don't know about you, but I certainly enjoyed those book reviews. Maybe I need to expand my own personal selections beyond beach reads, but we'll see. I think it's a wonderful example of reinventing, investing in yourself. I know from my own personal experience, having been a banker for my entire career, you never know what opportunities are going to be presented your way. When you're young, you're developing a path, you're not quite sure which way it's going to go, and just have to be open to all the opportunities that come your way. Our second speaker tonight is here. I'm very happy to have just met personally the Honorable Matt Meyer, who's Newcastle County Executive. Very interested to hear what Matt has to say. I see he's doing great work with the county, and so come on up, Matt, and share your experiences with the audience.
Thank you very much. Good evening. Good evening. You still awake out there? Doing all right? Long day at work. Hey, how you doing? Friday fuel up. It's good to see everyone tonight. Thanks especially to everyone at the Money School, Joel Schiller, Ronnie Cohen. It's amazing work. You know, anytime I come to these events about entrepreneurship and small business, when I grew up here, and when I returned home from serving as a diplomat in Iraq in January of 2011, I worked as an economic advisor to Governor Markell. And my primary job was to work with entrepreneurs, to facilitate entrepreneurship and small business across the state. We'd throw events like this in 2011, 2012, and get 6, 7, 10 people. And so it's honestly a credit to Joel, to Ronnie, to all the work of the great people at the Money School, along with the support, of course, of Barclay Card, TD Bank, the treasurer, Velda Jones-Potter, Danette Rivera, and the Kenny Family Foundation. Would you give them all a round of applause? What you're doing and what they're doing is extraordinarily important, as I'm going to explain. It's extraordinarily important. I learned two things as an entrepreneur that I want to share with you tonight. I grew up here in Wilmington, and what I really wanted to do when I was in high school was one thing. It wasn't that hard, just one thing, and that was save the world. And I was really serious about it. I was I was more serious about it than most people are who say they want to save the world. I was going to go to Africa. I wanted to find the poorest community in the world I could find, and I was going to go there and do whatever I could to help. I felt like in this day and age, or in that day and age, which isn't that different from this day and age, but in this day and age, we have an extraordinary opportunities to get on airplanes, to go across the world, to see different people, experience different things, different languages. And I was so eager to do that I was in college, I was studying computer science, and the first chance I got, my junior year of college, I realized that it would be a little bit less expensive for me to go on a study abroad program outside the country in Kenya than it would be to stay in college, because it was so expensive in the US. And I went to Kenya, and I ended up in Nairobi, and I ended up working in a shanty town called Mathare Valley. And I wanted to do whatever I could to help. And after spending 4 months there, I came back home for my senior year of college. And I spent a lot of time in the computer lab trying to finish my computer science degree. But I was really obsessed with one thing, and that was making sandals. They made sandals out of used tires in Kenya, as they do in Vietnam and Mexico and a lot of places around the world. And I believe that if we added a little fabric and style to the used tire sandals, we could sell them all over the world. And I felt like if we did that from a very poor neighborhood, we could do what I called a little Robin Hood, which is get rich people from around the world to buy things from the poorest people in the world and create jobs, and using the economic system for the benefit of the poorest of the poor. So I finished computer science. I got all these job opportunities to work as a programmer, and I also got a grant. Sort of 2 weeks before I graduated college, I got a grant for $10,000 to go spend a year in Kenya to start this business. And I did. I went there, and I spent a year living in a little village called Buruburu in Kenya and working in Mathare Valley with young people. It took about 3 years of struggle before we even broke even. I spent a year there, and then I came back, and I continued working on the business. And in hindsight, the biggest impediment to our success was one thing. It was that I, as an entrepreneur, was not paying attention to our revenues and expenses. I wasn't paying attention to our revenues and expenses. And every entrepreneur and small business person I talk to today, anyone who calls themselves an entrepreneur, I say the first thing you need to figure out is your revenues and your expenses. Your revenues and your expenses. Now, for most of you, revenues are about dollars. It's about money. It's the money school. Expenses are about dollars. I've learned since then that it's not necessarily about dollars and cents. The most entrepreneurial and innovative thing I've done in my life was actually last year. I decided to run for office against a 3-term incumbent. And as I sat down and started to plan out the campaign that I was going to run, I did something very similar to what I did in Nairobi, Kenya 20 years earlier. I laid out revenues and expenses, but of course revenues weren't really in dollars. Now, don't get me wrong, as the state treasurer knows, when you run for office, fundraising is quite a bit of what you do, and the city treasurer knows as well. It's quite a bit of what you do, but ultimately, that wasn't the bottom line. The revenues that I was counting were votes, and the expenses were time and money that I had to spend to get those votes. And if I could maximize my revenues and minimize my expenses a little bit better than my opponent, I was going to win. No different than a small business, no different than a nonprofit, right? Know what your revenues are, know what your expenses are, and spend every single day thinking about how you can maximize your revenues and minimize your expenses. Now, that sounds pretty obvious, but I can tell you, as a 23-year-old in Kenya, having this dream of this sandal company that sold sandals all over the world, I was distracted. I was constantly distracted. There were all sorts of exciting, cool events that I thought would help the business. I could go and meet other entrepreneurs. I had to select a lawyer and an accountant, right? I had to do all those things. And I spent a lot of time doing those things. And I wasn't sure. There were 3 really good accountants that I liked, and they were pretty inexpensive. And I spent a lot of time trying to figure out and interviewing. Looking back, that was a complete waste of time. I had to figure out, how can I make the best product I can possibly make, maximize my revenues? Who am I competing against, and how can I maximize my revenues compared to them? How can I make sure my product is better than theirs? So make sure, as entrepreneurs, as small business people, you know what the revenues are, you know what your product is, and every day you're thinking about, how do you maximize those revenues, and how do you minimize your expenses? The second thing I learned in training at the State Department. Before I went to Iraq, I was selected to go serve in a place called Mosul, Iraq. At the time, the military had gone over to Iraq, of course, and had taken over the country, and they had a problem that the military is very effective, among the best fighting forces in the world, at going somewhere and taking over territory. But they're not really good, don't have particularly expertise in running a place, in putting a government in place. The U.S. military was not trained to stand up an Iraqi government and stand up a democracy and run elections. So they had the State Department go over, and I had an appointment with the State Department to go over there. And it was the first time I'd worked for a large governmental agency, and it was incredibly bureaucratic. Right as soon as I got in, I realized that most people in the government entity, they clock in at a certain time, they clock out, and they're done, right? Once it hits Friday, 4:29 p.m., you wait, you count the seconds, boom, I'm out, I'm gone. And during my training, there was an experienced diplomat who said, you know, you can be an entrepreneur. You can be an entrepreneur wherever you are. Wherever you are, you can be an entrepreneur. You just got to think like you own the place. You got to think like you own the place. What do you worry about, right? What do you worry about if you're running an office in Iraq for the U.S. State Department? Well, you want there to be peace. And so you think, what are some good ideas I can have to engage with Iraqis to be peaceful? So I'd often talk to my boss and say, hey, what if we do this and what do we do? He thought I was so whack. Because you don't do it. You sort of have a list of jobs, you get to work, you do your jobs. And it's something I've taken with me, that you can be an entrepreneur wherever you are, whatever you do. It's something I've taken to your county government. And I teach our people. I speak now to every single employee, each of our 2,000 employees that come. Every 2 weeks we have an orientation, and I speak to every single one of them. And I said, yes, you have job responsibilities, and some of those are very strictly dictated by union contracts, and there are things you can do and can't do. And I'm not saying violate that or break that, but I'm saying every day you come to work, you think like an entrepreneur. You think like you're a citizen. How do you maximize benefit for the people of this county, and how do you minimize expense? How do we all work to provide local government that's honest, transparent, and efficient. So I imagine among you, there are people looking at or who have started organizations to help people. You can be an entrepreneur. There are people here who I know work in government and work very hard in government at the highest levels and maybe at entry levels. I want you to know that you can be an entrepreneur. And there are people here, of course, who are business people, and you can be an entrepreneur too. In just 9 months, working like an entrepreneur in county government, we've already started to see the impact. Just last week, Insight. Raise your hand if you know what Insight is. Insight's one of the largest companies in Delaware. Forbes recently named it one of the 10 most innovative biotech companies in the world. They have a product called Jakafi that's saving lives of people with cancer every single day. And it's headquartered where I used to buy clothes in high school in the Wanamaker's building on Augustine Cutoff. They wanted to build a new building. Our average time in the county for approving a plan, a complex plan like that from a large company, was nearly 2 years. The problem is that if it takes that long to approve a plan to build a building, what do you think big companies are going to do? They're going to get out of here, right? They're going to go somewhere else far, far away, or even worse, to Kent or Sussex County. With all due respect to anyone in here from Kent or Sussex County. That was a joke. I'm a Delawarean. But what we did is by streamlining the process, I had my eyes on it, and I wanted to know every day what was happening with this plan. I didn't want to break the law. That wasn't the desire. And I didn't want to railroad things through. If communities, if neighbors had concerns, and some neighbors there on Augustine Cutoffs did have concerns, if there were environmental concerns, if there were engineering concerns, I wanted to make sure that those were addressed. But I wanted to make sure the process was streamlined, it was honest, transparent, and efficient. And we cut down the time by 67%. It was the fastest plan that ever went through county government. So we're doing things that hopefully will benefit and will create jobs here simply by taking that same entrepreneurial mindset I learned as a 20-year-old on the other side of the world right here back to Newcastle County. So I want to emphasize to you that if each of you go out and fulfill your entrepreneurial purpose, if you think like an entrepreneur, it will reap so much benefit for our county and our state. It will make the problems that our city treasurer, that our state treasurer, and that I deal with every single day so much easier if you're out there thinking about how to create, thinking about how to solve everyday problems that the people in our county and our state are facing. It will matter to all of us. So thank you very much for coming tonight, and thanks for inviting me here.
Thank you, Matt. Being an entrepreneur, thinking innovatively. What a wonderful message. What an inspirational story. Finally, it's my pleasure to introduce our third speaker tonight, Rakia Reynolds, the dynamic PR guru and owner of Sky Blue Media. We're all excited to hear what Rakia has to say tonight. So come on up.
All right, good evening, everyone. I'm so excited to be here tonight because I think as an entrepreneur, the more and more we tell our stories, the more therapeutic it is. So I'm going to take this opportunity to just sit on the couch and tell you my story because, again, the more and more we share, the more and more that we're transparent. Not only is it helping you, but it also helps me. So just to let you know why I'm here and who I am, again, my name is Rakia Reynolds. I own a company called Sky Blue Media. So my hair is actually blue. It's kind of green now because I haven't gotten it done. But we like to stay on brand, and we really love the color blue. So I wear blue glasses, or I have blue heels or blue shoes at any given time, or blue nail polish when all the other things run out. And the color blue is significant to us, and when I built the company, it was about being honest. And the color blue represents trust, honesty, and sincerity. And when I was starting my company, and I'll go back to how I got there, when I was starting my company, people were telling me the world of public relations, you have to make things up, you have to produce stunts, you have to massage things. And for me, it was, that's being dishonest. I don't ever want to be dishonest. My parents raised me to be honest. So when I started the company, I wanted to make sure that it was embodying who I was and what my brand is. So my company, Sky Blue Media, we represent big companies, and we're partnering with companies like Dell. I'm the face of small business for Dell. So I'm the face of, if you go into a Best Buy to buy a Dell laptop, I'm on all of their computers and billboards. And it's funny, I'm known as the Dell lady now, which I think is so funny. And I also work with Serena Williams on her line for HSN and perfecting her brand voice. We represent top models like Ashley Graham. Our youngest client is a 12-year-old social activist. She's one of the most honest people I know. And we started a campaign with her called #1000 Black Girl Books that really started on this notion of her going into her classrooms and looking in the library saying, I'm tired of reading about white boys and their dogs, and I want to see brown girls in books. And when she said that, her mother said, what do you want to do about it? So we started this campaign for her to find 1,000 books that really represented who she is and what she does. And we later on, got on Ellen, and now we have over 10,000 books, and we're in all of these different countries, with the message of #1000 Black Girl Books. We also work in the world of nonprofits, so working with nonprofits like Global Citizen and In Liquid and Visit Philadelphia. We're also working with the city of Philadelphia on trying to bring big businesses into the city. So my story is very non-linear. When I was in 4th grade, I was diagnosed with ADHD, and my parents were always talking about how I was fidgeting and how I had all of these outbursts in class and how I had too much energy. And the teachers, I went to this really small Catholic school, and the teachers would, for punishment sometimes, take my desk out of the classroom and push it all the way down the hallway and had me in complete isolation. So I'd be sitting in front of the principal's office, or I'd have to have lunch in the hallway by myself because I had so much energy. I was always moving around. So my parents were like, well, what can we give her? What can we do? They tried everything. I was taking melatonin to go to sleep, and I started to sleepwalk, and then my parents were like, well, let's tire her out. Let's put her on swim teams. Let's just make sure that she is tired when she comes home. And then we started to see that it was not just the energy that I had, but I was learning differently. All of the kids were handing in book reports, and I couldn't hand in a book report because I couldn't sit still enough to write down what, the character was, or to understand or comprehend what the story was. So my father had this idea. He said, well, you like TV and you like to move around so much, why don't we just use the video camera, and instead of you writing about the Boston Tea Party, why don't you videotape and tell us your interpretation of it? And I thought, wow, okay, that might be fun. I don't have to go and write like all of the other kids. And at that moment, I was a TV producer in the making. I was producing all of this content. And our PSA to parents, like, listen to your kids and mold them into who they were, because I've started to become really entrepreneurial in my spirit. And for those of you, the word entrepreneur is so important to me, because the word entrepreneur means the person that organizes or develops something and assumes the risk. And in most times, it's the financial risk. So as an adult, we assume the financial risk. But as a child, I was assuming the risk of being laughed at when I came into the classroom, handing in a VHS tape instead of the book report, or being pushed out of the classroom. So when I went into college, I then was able to study like all of the other children. My parents got me help, and we'll skip all of the after school sadness that we went through. But everything that I did as a child really molded me into the adult that I became. So when I graduated from college, I then became a producer for MTV, TLC, and Discovery Health. And all of those things that I had done as a kid came back. It was producing the content. It was seeing the story a little differently. It was because we had to work 12-hour days, I never got tired. Everybody else was like, oh man, this is we're on our 10th hour. And I'm like, we've got 2 more to go. We can do this. because I was that kid that really couldn't sit still. Now, I think back to, thank God for my father. And I always say I have a mother and a father. My mother didn't see eye to eye with me. She thought, well, if we put her on Ritalin or we medicate her, she can be like all of the other kids. And so I had this one parent saying, you can be like all of the other kids. I want you to sit still. How many of your parents said, sit down somewhere? That's my mother. She still says it. Rakia, sit down somewhere. You can't be on every ship that sails. And I'm always like, yes, I can, because my father told me so. And since my father told me so, I believed everything. And because my father had this belief in me to say, she is a different child, she learns differently, she's going to talk differently, she's going to walk differently, it really molded me into the person that I am today. So I always say, thank God for my father, or I'd probably would just be sitting down somewhere. But in the road to entrepreneurship, I've learned so many things. People see, Rakia, all of this glory, you're with these celebrities, you're with these really great tech companies, but people see the glory and they don't know the story. And when I was a kid, going through all of that, it never left me. So, life goes up and down. You're on this roller coaster. So by the time I started catching up with things and I was basking in my glory as a television producer, I was thriving. All of these amazing things that I learned as a child came back to me. And then it was time for me to really get into the fundamentals of learning how to start a business. And I started a business because I was thriving in the world of television and media and building content and working on all of these television shows. But then TV took a turn for the worse. Something called the recession happened, and people stopped watching as much television as they were before. They weren't subscribing as they were before, and I got laid off. And I said, wow, I'm back at this again. I've worked so hard. I've overcome so many obstacles, and how am I back in the place where I started? And when I was on unemployment, one thing I said to myself is that I didn't want to eat peanut butter and jelly for the rest of my life, and I did not want to eat tuna fish sandwiches for the rest of my life, because that's what I was eating when I was on unemployment, because I was married, I had one child, my husband was in grad school, and we were like, we can hardly afford oatmeal at this time. So we were on this strict budget, and we had dinners of, grilled cheese, and then the grilled cheese turned into tuna melts, and then they came into fun peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, and we'd fry those up as well. So I got into this moment where, no, I've been put in a position, and I want to be able to dictate my own destiny. So I took everything that I had learned from MTV and TLC and Discovery Health and freelancing at all of these magazines, producing this editorial and looking at that editorial, and I said, what if I mixed it in a bowl? Because if I did things my way when I was a kid, because I had to learn a certain way, as an adult, I probably have to do it my way again. And so I looked at, how do I look at industries and disrupt what they're doing? I see what the public relations industry is doing. I see what the television industry is doing. But how do I do it my way? And if I'm on unemployment, I don't have a job, I've got a little bit of time on my hands. And I found out just different ways that I could navigate through the spaces where I needed to be in. And I decided to create Sky Blue Media, and it was a multimedia communications agency. People thought I was crazy. And in the beginning, it was myself and an intern. We started in a co-share space where we paid like $285 a month. I had a cardboard desk that had this beautiful lacquer finish on it, and people always say, like, how did you grow from this cardboard desk into this, to this amazing office? And I always said, well, because I believed that cardboard desk was like a beautiful glass desk, and I believed when I walked into the office that there were tons of people working in there. I believed it so much that I was convincing myself, so when I went out into the public, people thought I was a 20-person company, and it was just me. People were like, oh my gosh, your agency is so huge. How do you guys get all this stuff done? And I'm like, well, internally I was saying it was just me. But I knew that it was that fire and that spark that I had as a kid, and then being an adult, knowing that one of my favorite quotes, and I think it was a pastor that said this, and it always stuck with me, that obstacles provoke the power in you. And I noticed that all of the obstacles that I had gone through and everything that I had to overcome was shaping me into this individual. So when I'm in a room with people and I sit at so many tables where most of the time there's no one that looks like me, there's no one that sounds like me, rarely any afros with blue hair, I will tell you. And I sit at these tables and I have to sit there and I have to fill out these chairs. And I, again, go back to that theory of visualizing myself as the biggest person in the room. So I make sure that I sit in the chairs and I take up every part of the chair. It's called power posing. But I think in entrepreneurship, you have to do that. You have to be a fan of your own brand. If you can be a fan of your own brand and you believe in your brand, other people will start to see that. And I don't think it's just having the foundations of business. Okay, you have all of the structural pieces of business, you have the finances, and I will tell you, I totally messed up in the finance department when I initially started the business, because with the mentality of an entrepreneur, sometimes we have this arrow and we just want to do it. And for me, I was so determined to do it that I missed some of the necessary steps. But what I did learn were a couple of things along the way. The first thing was this level of authenticity. You have to be authentic. People want the real you. The second thing that I learned was you have to be honest. You have to be honest to yourself and other people. Even when you're failing forward, that lesson of you failing forward can actually teach someone something else. And when you fail forward, it's just another opportunity to see how you can do things differently the second, third, fourth, and sometimes it might be the seventh time. Always be ready with the next steps plan. You know, sometimes we have plan A, sometimes plan B, but sometimes C, D, and E are the ones that are the most important, because you can't just focus on what am I going to do next. It's what am I going to do in 2 years, what am I going to do in 3, 4, and you have to be that complete visionary. Know your value proposition. You know, when you go into a room with people, what do you say during your elevator pitch that differentiates you from the person sitting next to you? And that is your unique value proposition. Sometimes we're in a room with hundreds of people that sound like us, talk like us, have the same business as us, but what is our unique value proposition? What are you offering to the world? And the next thing I learned was surround yourself with people that believe in your purpose, proposition, or your plan. And my chief of staff, Almas Crow, shout out to her, she came up with this term called friend-tours. So a friend-tour is like a mentor, but they're going to tell you when you've completely messed up, and they're going to tell you when you're doing such an amazing job. So develop a friend-tour advisory board of people that you're meeting with on a consistent basis, because in the world of entrepreneurship, there is definitely not you. It's just not an I thing. It's always a we. And you have to condition yourself to know that you cannot, no matter what anyone tells you, you cannot do it alone. So have that friend tour advisory board. Be transparent. We live in a world where people get lost in likes, and social media, the likes are the new currency. But I do think that we have such an image problem in this country and in this world because we're dictating what these images are, and we're so image driven. So be transparent. But in addition to being transparent, you also have to know when to fog up your glass. You have to know when you have to have certain boundaries. You have to know when you're maybe portraying, or, in the world of brand, I always say there's a perception. It's things that people understand and what people perceive, but you also have to know when to block up those boundaries and fog up your glass. The other thing is make yourself a commodity. People want more of you when they have less access to you. If you're at the same things all of the time, how are you upping the ante? And another thing that I learned is, this is a simple one. Be careful of complaining. Not every, hey, how are you, is an opportunity for you to spill out everything that's going wrong. There is this thing called positive energy, and people like to be around positive energy. So be careful of complaining. And then the last thing was, for me, it was make every attempt and plan to be great. And great is different in everyone's eyes. Great sometimes is success. Great is sometimes success in making sure that you have a job that you love, or that you're starting a career or building a business that you're having fun doing. And for me, success was attempting to be great every day. I am a mother, I am a Christian, I'm a daughter, I'm a wife. So at all of those things, I try for myself to make sure that I have every attempt to be great at every single day. Because the world of entrepreneurship, it is your destiny, it's your journey. And not all of us are equipped with the navigation system and the tools. You can't turn something on and say, do I turn left or do I turn right? And when you do make a wrong turn, you don't have that voice that says, rerouting, go three steps and then make another right. So in entrepreneurship, you have to learn that, you are the person as entrepreneurs that are assuming more than greater financial risk. That is what entrepreneurship is. It's developing those assets in a business where you will assume more than greater. That means that sometimes we may have the world on our shoulders, but it's having those simple steps in place that says, hey, I don't have to do this alone. I have my friend tour advisory board. I have people around me that believe in me. I have people around me that will push me into my purpose, proposition, and plan. So thank you for letting me sit on your couch this evening. I hope you enjoy the rest of the event and mingle and network and share your story. Thanks.
Thank you, Rakia. I love your style. That's wonderful. Hopefully all these positive messages will inspire you as you continue on your own personal journey. We're just about done with the formal program. One other piece of business, I'd like to invite Danette Rivera to the stage for one last piece of business.
Good evening. So this piece of the program is actually a surprise. It's not on your agenda. Because although I'm a sponsor today, I actually wanted to take the opportunity to publicly thank Ronnie, because she has been amazing at supporting small businesses, but she has been amazing at supporting mine. I'm going to get emotional, because Ronnie is instrumental and has been in allowing me to be in business for 10 years, almost 10 years. And it's because she is such a cheerleader for people like me. She is such a cheerleader for those people that she believes and helps every day in the community. And I don't think she knows it. I don't think she recognizes to the level that she does those things. When I first launched Rivera Business Development in 2008, Ronnie was the first person to instantly find ways to give me work, but also to introduce me to so many people so that I could get opportunities. And then as a teacher, she helped me with personal development, because she insisted that my training programs be written like a lesson plan. And I kept fighting her because I said, I'm not a teacher. I'm not supposed to be writing lesson plans. I don't even know how. So she sent me to trainings at the Fed with teachers, and I learned to write lesson plans. And for that today, my manuals are much better in my training programs than they could have ever been. But when we have had tragedy in our lives, she has been there for that too. And so I just want to recognize you for your support. Thank you.
Thank you. So that concludes the formal presentations for this evening. Thank you all for attending. Please network, enjoy the many resources that are here. Remember to hand in your sign-in cards and your Why I Give cards. And on behalf of DFLI's board and staff, have a good night, everyone. Thank you.